I met him in a simple place, almost too ordinary to mark the beginning of something so big. It was a small corner cafe, wooden tables, the constant smell of fresh coffee. I was sitting alone, waiting for time to pass, scrolling through my phone without really paying attention, when he started a conversation. Nothing forced, nothing exaggerated. It was natural. He commented on the phone in my hand, smiled in a calm, gentle way, and sat at the table next to mine. We talked as if we had known each other for years. And I remember thinking, in that exact moment, how long it had been since I felt so comfortable with someone. He was kind, polite, attentive to details. In the days that followed, we kept seeing each other, first at that same cafe, then on long walks, unhurried conversations, soft laughter. He seemed like everything I had always hoped for, everything I imagined when I thought about a real relationship. He knew how to listen. He knew how to care. He knew how to be present. With time, he became part of my routine. Good morning messages, unexpected calls, small gestures that made me feel chosen. I felt safe, and for me, that had always been rare. He treated me very well. He never raised his voice. He was never rude. He never made me feel small, but still, there was something I couldn't explain. It was as if a part of him was always locked away, a past he never mentioned. Whenever the conversation came close to older memories, he gently changed the subject, almost without me noticing. I never pushed, I never questioned. I believed that love was also about respecting the other person's timing, that when the moment was right, he would tell me everything. I trusted him. I trusted the way he looked at me, the way he held my hand, the calm he made me feel. I didn't imagine that, while I was building dreams, he was hiding a secret too big to stay hidden forever. And I didn't know it yet, but that silence was about to change everything. The years passed, and, without me even realizing it, we were already husband and wife. Life unfolded quietly. An organized home, a defined routine, shared responsibilities. It wasn't a perfect marriage, but it was stable. He was still affectionate, caring, present in his own way. I felt safe there. I felt like I had made the right choice. We talked about the future, simple plans, nothing too grand. But there was something that never changed. He was still a closed-off man. Whenever the past came up, over time, I learned to live with that. You learn not to ask certain questions. You learn to respect silence. You learn to believe that if something truly mattered, it would be said. Until that day. It was an ordinary morning. He had left early for work, and I decided to organize the bedroom, changing seasonal clothes, cleaning drawers, the things we keep postponing. I opened his wardrobe slowly, folding t-shirts, separating what he no longer used. That's when I noticed a small box, hidden at the back, behind clothes that were rarely touched. It didn't draw attention. It was simple, old. I picked it up out of curiosity, not suspicion. I thought it was nothing important, maybe old documents, old memories. When I opened it, I saw a few papers, carefully folded. I took one of them. It was an official document. My heart started racing. My hands went cold. Before I could fully understand what I was holding, I heard the door opening. He had come back earlier that day. When he walked into the bedroom and saw the paper in my hand, his face changed. He turned pale. His eyes widened. His breathing became heavy. Without saying a word, he rushed toward me, snatched the paper from my hand, and shut the box hard. "Don't touch that," he said, his voice trembling. It wasn't anger. It was fear. I stood there, confused, trying to understand what had just happened. He put the box back, avoided my eyes, and left the room. I didn't ask anything at that moment. I didn't confront him. I didn't argue. But inside me, something had awakened, because after years of marriage, I realized There was still a part of his life I had never known, and that didn't leave me at peace. That night, I barely slept. He was lying next to me, breathing calmly, as if nothing had happened, and I, wide awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to organize thoughts that kept crashing into each other. It wasn't curiosity, it was intuition. Something inside me whispered that that little box wasn't just about the past. It was about something that still carried weight in the present. In the days that followed, he went back to normal, affectionate, attentive, gentle as always, but I could no longer see him the same way. I started noticing the small details, longer silences, eyes that looked away when the topic was family, vague answers to simple questions. And then I understood something painful. It's not the secret itself that hurts. It's realizing that you can share an entire life with someone and still not know all the truths they carry inside. I waited for the right moment, not out of fear, but because some conversations require emotional preparation. A week later, on a quiet night, we were having dinner in silence. The atmosphere felt too light for the weight I carried in my chest. Still, I took a deep breath. "What was that document?" I asked, carefully. He stopped chewing. It took him a few seconds to respond, and for the first time in all those years, I saw his eyes fill with tears. "I thought this would never come back," he said, almost in a whisper. My heart tightened, because in that moment I knew it wasn't something small, it wasn't something simple, and it definitely wasn't something that could be ignored. He took a deep breath, rested his elbows on the table, and ran his hands over his face. He looked tired, not physically, but emotionally. "Before I met you, I lived a life I'm not proud of," he began. And in that moment, I understood that this conversation wouldn't just change the way I saw his past. It could change everything I believed about our marriage. Because some truths, when they come to light, don't just ask for understanding. They ask for the courage to decide what to do with them. He took a long time to continue. He stayed silent for a few seconds, staring at the table, as if he were choosing which parts of his own life he could still touch. "I never told you because I thought that, if it stayed buried, it wouldn't hurt anyone," he said. "But some things don't die when we hide them." My stomach twisted. He stood up, walked to the bedroom, and came back holding the small box. This time, he didn't try to hide it. He placed it on the table. Slowly. "This isn't just a piece of paper," he continued. "It's proof of who I was, and of what I lost." He opened the box, took out the document, placed it in front of me. It was a certificate, not a marriage certificate, not a property document, not a debt. It was a birth certificate of a child. His name was there, in the field marked father. I felt the ground disappear beneath me. "I have a son," he said. "Before I met you." My breathing failed. My heart started beating too fast, far too fast. "The mother left the city when he was still very young," he continued. "I tried to look for him, tried to get closer, but everything went wrong. Over time, I lost contact. I lost news. I lost the right to be present. I didn't know what to feel. Anger, sadness, compassion, shock. Everything came at once. I carried this guilt with me all these years," he said, his voice breaking. "When I met you, I wanted to start over, to be someone better, but I never had the courage to tell you, because I was afraid of losing you." That's when I understood. The secret wasn't just about his past. It was about fear. Fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear of not being worthy of the love he had found. I looked at that paper again, and I realized nothing would ever be the same. Because loving someone sometimes means discovering truths that don't hurt because they're wrong, but because they show that the other person is more human than we ever imagined. And that night, I didn't need to answer anything. I didn't need to decide anything. I realized just one thing. Love was there, but now, it needed to pass through the truth, to keep existing. Not the comfortable silence of people who understand each other, but the heavy silence of someone who has just discovered that life isn't as simple as it once seemed. He looked at me, waiting for a reaction. Anything. Anger, tears, screaming, accusation. But I had none of that. Just a knot in my throat, and the feeling that I was looking at a stranger who, at the same time, was the man I loved. Did you ever think about telling me? I finally asked. He lowered his head. Every day. That hurt more than the revelation itself. Because it wasn't just about a hidden child. It was about years of silence. Years of decisions made alone. Years in which I believed we were sharing everything, when, in truth, we weren't. I stood up from the table, went to the window. I needed air. Outside, life went on as usual. Cars passing by, lights turning on, people living, and inside me, something was rearranging itself. I went back to the table and looked him in the eyes. I'm not angry that you have a past, I said. I'm hurt because I wasn't part of the truth, he cried. In silence, like someone who had finally let the weight fall. I don't know what this changes, I continued. But I know it changes something, and we'll need to decide whether we build from here with truth, or if we stop here. It wasn't an immediate decision. There were no promises, no dramatic endings. There was a silent agreement. Nothing else would be hidden. That night, we slept in the same bed, but separated by thoughts that needed time. And I understood something I had never learned before. Love doesn't end when the truth appears. It ends when the truth no longer fits inside the relationship. The next morning, I woke up different. No longer naive. No longer as secure as before, but aware. Because from that day on, I was no longer just a wife. I was a woman choosing, with clarity, whether that love could still grow, or if it had already fulfilled what it came to teach. As the days went by, something began to change inside me. The pain didn't disappear, but it stopped being the only feeling. I started to observe him more closely. The small gestures, the way he stayed silent for too long, the weight he carried in his eyes, even when he tried to smile. And that's when I realized, behind the man who hid a truth, there was someone carrying an old, unresolved guilt, one he never had the courage to face. It was no longer just about what he didn't tell me. It was about everything he lived through alone. On a quiet night, sitting on the couch, no TV on, no distractions. I took his hand. He flinched at the gesture, as if he wasn't expecting affection in that moment. Did you ever try to look for them again? I asked gently. To find out where he was, where the child was. He took a deep breath before answering. I looked for a while, he said, but I was immature, lost. And when I lost contact, I thought maybe it was better that way. I spent years trying to move on, pretending it was resolved, but it never was. Hearing that didn't push me away. On the contrary, for the first time, I didn't see only the mistake. I saw the pain. I saw the fear. I saw a man who didn't know how to deal with his own choices, and paid for it in silence. Maybe it's not too late, I said. He looked at me, confused. Too late for what? He asked. To look for them. To try to explain. To face this story. His eyes filled with tears. You would do that? He asked. After everything? I squeezed his hand tighter. I'm not helping because of the past, I replied. I'm helping because of the love that exists now. In that moment, something was rebuilt between us. Not the innocence from before, but something stronger. A love that doesn't close its eyes. That doesn't run from the truth. That chooses to walk together, even when the path is difficult. I knew it wouldn't be simple. That this search could bring painful answers. That nothing guaranteed a happy ending. But for the first time since the revelation, I wasn't afraid. I felt courage. Because loving, sometimes, is this. Not erasing the past, but helping someone finally face it. Deciding to search was easy, compared to what came after, because from the moment the decision was made, there was no longer any way to pretend that this story belonged only to the past. We started slowly. Names, cities, old dates. He had very little information, just a few scattered memories. Addresses that no longer existed. People who had moved away. And with every failed attempt, I could feel the fear growing inside him. Fear of not finding. Fear of finding. And being rejected. Fear of discovering that time had caused irreversible damage. There were days when he wanted to give up. He said maybe it was better to leave everything as it was. That maybe that child, no longer really a child, had continued life without needing this late explanation. But I could see it clearly. It wasn't giving up, it was protection. Protection against a pain he wasn't sure he could survive. One of those nights, he said to me, "If he doesn't want to see me, I'll understand." And that was when I truly understood the weight of that search. It wasn't about reconciliation, nor about happy endings. It was about responsibility, about owning a past that couldn't be changed, but still needed to be acknowledged. When we finally found a possible contact, silence filled the house. The phone on the table, the message written, but not sent. I looked at him and said, "No matter what happens, you're not alone anymore." He nodded, took a deep breath, and pressed send. In that moment, I knew. The outcome didn't matter. The transformation had already begun. The answer didn't come right away, not the next day. It came after a few days that felt like weeks. Few words. Dry, careful. There was no explicit anger. But there was no immediate openness either. And that was understandable. Some absences leave marks too deep to be healed by late explanations. He read the message in silence, closed his eyes, and, for the first time since I had known him, he didn't try to control what he felt. He cried. Not out of despair, but out of acceptance. Acceptance that not every apology receives a response. And that, even so, owning your own story is a necessary step. In the days that followed, something changed between us. Not because everything was resolved, but because nothing was hidden anymore. Our marriage was no longer held together by silence. It was held together by truth. I didn't know how that story would end for him and his son. Maybe with closeness. Maybe only with respectful distance. But I knew how it ended for us. With maturity, with conscious choices, with the understanding that loving someone is not demanding perfection, but deciding, every single day, whether the other person's truth still fits inside the love we've built. And there, at that point in our story, I understood something that changed everything. Love is not about what begins clean. It's about what remains honest, even after everything is revealed. And that's how we moved forward. Not as before, but more real than ever. If you liked it, write part 2 in the comments.